Hi, I'm Regan Robinson, your host of Future Fit, the only podcast unraveling the secrets of how the world's most innovative leaders stay future ready in a fast-paced world. I've spent over 20 years as a futurist and strategist, transforming top global brands and putting investment-backed startups on paths to sustainable growth. Along the way, I've become obsessed with new ways to prepare for the future, because thinking about the long term once a year simply isn't enough. In each episode, I talk with movers, shakers, and path breakers who share their stories about how they turn uncertainty into their strategic advantage. Throughout our journey, we'll discover unconventional and imaginative ways to help you thrive today while leading your teams into tomorrow. Future Fit leaders know that being prepared for what's next is more than a business decision. It's a way of being. Let's venture together as we co-create a new future readiness playbook. The future can't wait, and neither can I. So, are you ready to get future fit? Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Tommy Knoll, an entrepreneur and business owner for more than 25 years with international experience across multiple industries. Tommy is renowned for his expertise in corporate innovation management and consulting, technology, e-commerce, importing and distribution, and advanced manufacturing, and is founder and head of the Innov8rs CoLab, a global working group of senior innovation leaders from the world's leading companies like 3M, Kraft Heinz, and Target. The Innov8rs CoLab is a member-driven collaboration of senior innovation, R&D, strategy, and venture leaders working together to design, create, and deliver innovations that are shaping our future, which of course I love, and who work together to build cross-industry networks of help and capability, solve innovation challenges, and share resources. Since 2011, the CoLab has hosted over 30 conferences in 30 cities around the world, from Singapore to San Francisco and Sydney to Stockholm. Tommy has founded or co-founded 6 companies, successfully exited 1, and has worked with hundreds of others developing businesses, sales channels, and high-performance teams. Tommy is approaching innovation and community building in a radical and refreshing way, and so I'm incredibly excited to hear what he has to share with us today. Welcome to the show, Tommy.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Likewise, super excited for our conversation. So let's get the show on the road with the question that I ask all of my guests, which is, what does future ready mean to you?
It's a great question, and I really appreciate it to kick off. I think the most important thing right now is probably resilience and adaptability. And in fact, we are in the process of updating our definitions of innovation, or what innovation is. And we are starting to include some of these, let's say, softer components in those definitions. So, of course, innovation is driving growth and revenue and market share. Those are absolutely important, but they have become table stakes, have to have those. And then this adaptability, this resilience are coming in right behind that as being supportive and important as well. So I'd say adaptability and resilience is future ready for me.
Yeah, I love that. And in fact, my point of view is future readiness is a state of being and not a one and done or annual activity that you check off your list. It's more of a capacity. It's also a capability, but it is, and we were talking about this a little bit in our warm-up chat, it's actually rooted in my belief that prioritizing well-being in all its forms and taking care of yourself is really a critical, essential ingredient of the future readiness recipe. You have to have that, build that resilience over time and that adaptability in order to actually move through the world in a way that is, considering the world that never stops moving, neither can you, right?
Yeah, I like that. I think the analogy that I would use in terms of just preparation, I love sports. I love professional athletes, and so much like athletes prepare off the pitch, let's say, or off the field, with nutrition and training and rest and recovery and strategy sessions. And then, of course, you get on the pitch and you play and you practice and then compete as well. As business professionals, as entrepreneurs and innovators, we're no different. We kind of have to do that. You have to have those same types of practices in place. Obviously, there are different forms and different arenas, no pun intended for that. But all professionals, I think, need to take on that type of a practice if they want to compete at the top.
Yes. And that is actually why my show is called Future Fit, because I'm trying to draw a corollary between fitness. Because I like you love sports, and I just think it's a beautiful metaphor or analogy for really this intrinsic full body, mind, soul way of being that is really important. And when you're, especially when you're a modern leader. So now we covered a lot of ground in our previous conversation, all of which we'll get to, but let's continue on this thread of mindsets. So one of my favorite recent articulations of innovation is that it's purposely vague, purposely reaching, and purposely trying to think about problems and challenges in new ways. It's ambiguous. And you and I have talked about how important it is to get comfortable with the uncomfortable when doing this work, and which in our shared experience is really hard, especially when you're working with ambitious C-suite and senior leaders. And so I'm curious, how do you cultivate a mindset that embraces the ambiguity inherent in the innovation journey? And what advice would you give to leaders who might be struggling with the uncertainty, which is already a theme in our conversation, that comes with this type of work?
It's also very important. I think that kind of continue with that analogy of sports, right? Like you don't know what's going to happen when you step onto the field. You don't know what's going to happen when you step into a meeting or a boardroom or you're leading a team. Like we don't always know. We can plan. Mike Tyson had a saying, what is it? Everybody's got a great plan until you get punched in the face. And it's like that, right? So we have to leave, I think, in some other functional areas of organizations. It's like finance, for instance, it might be required to be a bit more rigid and structured, and that's a requirement of that particular practice, or that law comes to mind. Medicine
Right.
comes to mind, right? These are things where, if you don't do it by the book or follow the procedures, then people's lives can literally be at stake. Yeah, military. I mean, lots of examples of where structure and rigidity in organization is really important. I think with innovation, that kind of that aperture opens up a little bit, and we tend to maybe experience a bit more of that ambiguity on a day-to-day basis. Maybe more things go unplanned. Whereas in the operating room, I don't know, I'm just going to throw this out there. I have no data to back this up, but let's just say 95% of the time, things go according to plan, right? For corporate innovators and entrepreneurs, that number is probably going to be significantly lower.
Yeah.
So having plenty of room to move and operate and adapt, right, to the situation is actually a competitive advantage. There are methodologies for doing that. Obviously, sports, going outside the business realm to practice whatever that adaptability is. Art and creativity is really good for that as well.
Yeah.
So I think that the theme here to this particular question is to have sufficient space to be able to move based on the current situation. And right now in the marketplace, that's probably we're at a heightened moment for that.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I'd also add, it's almost like adopting more of a playground mentality where you're treating the innovation process like a sandbox where exploration and experimentation are not allowed, but but it's celebrated, and you're actually willing to get a little dirty, if you will, along the way. And really, even things like, it's gonna sound silly, but affirmations, like creating and repeating affirmations that reinforce your ability to handle uncertainty and ambiguity, mindfulness practices. Again, I'm touching on more of the softer skills as you talked about, but I believe it's actually fundamental. And then committing to trying something new and unfamiliar all the time.
And in most organizations, that's not always a given. That's not always there, where there's an acceptance to fail, or or general patience, right? The top repeat innovators, those organizations that are dynamic, we can think of those. They have that in abundance. You go off and you fail. Jeff Bezos is probably the best example of that. You lose $1 billion here and there. Not that it's okay, but we're going to accept that, and there's value in that process, right? That's not always the given. Yeah. So in some organizations, that space, that tolerance, that patience, we call it a sandbox. You can call it whatever you want, an innovation labs where that activity can happen. But of course, setting that up for experimentation, learning, failure, incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about collaboration now in the context of innovation. Now, I think the myth of the lone innovator, which is the idea that groundbreaking inventions are the result of solitary genius, right, is part of what's getting in the way of perhaps more effortless approaches to innovation and future readiness. And that's because this narrative really romanticizes figures like Steve Jobs as singular masterminds who created transformative innovations alone. But most breakthroughs actually result from collective efforts where diverse skills and perspectives and iterative processes contribute. And your business model is about fostering collaboration around innovation. And so I'm curious, what does collaboration in an innovation context mean to you? And how are you approaching it in unconventional ways that really create the optimal group dynamics for this type of work?
Yeah, those are questions we live in almost every day. And I think that the myth of the solo whatever, right? The Lone Ranger, the lone wolf, right? Those archetypes have been, I'll be a little bit provocative here, but they've been crafted in the marketplace. Those are narratives that have been crafted
Right.
for whatever reason. There might be good reasons to elevate a Steve Jobs, a Jeff Bezos, or the Google founders, right? Two guys in a job coding in a garage coding all night, right? That kind of that typical
Right.
Silicon Valley story, right? Those are all narratives that we hear, and they're just narratives. They're made up for whatever reason that is behind them. But none of these folks would have done it without a massive team behind them, whether it's
Right.
investors or customers or partners or obviously employees and engineers, right? There are massive teams behind these that get this job done. And our work is around the opposite of, let's just say, that narrative, right?
Yeah.
Where we really take a collaborative approach, and I might use some buzzwords here, but a collaborative approach to best practice sharing. Really, what that means is what's going on in the marketplace right now to the people that matter the most, right? So our members are folks that are in entrepreneurial roles in larger organizations, mid to large cap organizations, Fortune 500 type organizations. And if you've ever been in a large organization, which I know you have, those folks, even though there's a large organization, especially the entrepreneurs, can feel really lonely or are
Oh, yeah.
really lonely. It's not just a feeling, it's very real. They're isolated, probably a
Yeah.
better way to describe it. And they're tasked with, in an aspirational sense, creating the future of the organization, right?
Mhm.
So they have some really big questions to answer. And so our work is around connecting those folks who are working at non-competing companies in a private way to share what's working, to share what's not working, and to be able to ask their peers who are either dealing with a similar challenge now or have or will, how you solve that, how you will solve that challenge, how are you going to get resources for a project, how are you going to build a staff, what does your governance model look like? I mean, the questions are endless.
Right.
And so what we do, I wouldn't say this is a unique model across the board. Salespeople to get together, finance people get together, in every function, CEOs get together and socialize. But this is a structured approach to innovation that allows our members to advance their innovation agenda by connecting not only with peers, but also other resources as well. If they want to run test markets, if they want to talk to consultants, if they want to talk to service providers. So our organization, our collaboration, have all of those resources and more with a figurative phone call away. But really, the core of the group is peers helping peers. There's a lot of folks that can have a lot of knowledge that isn't really shared broadly. Some folks share and they write and they publish, most don't. And so, what we want to do is create an environment that's private where they can come and let their guard down and say, hey, these are the real challenges that are going on in my organization. How have you solved it? And so then that allows them to unlock and move their own challenges or innovation and growth agenda forward.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So, first of all, even Steve Jobs said great things in business are never done by one person; they're done by a team. Literally, that's straight from the horse's mouth. And there's so many examples from history. For example, Albert Einstein was seen as a solitary genius who revolutionized physics with his theory of relativity, but he really built on the work of other scientists, and he collaborated exclusively with a bunch of folks to actually land on that. And so I do think it's important to recognize this myth because it fosters a more accurate understanding of how innovation truly happens and encourages a more collaborative environment that also then creates psychologically safe spaces, which is something that you and I talked about a little bit in terms of previously, in terms of the dynamics that sort of happen in the room. And I'm curious if there are any psychological safety is a big topic on my show. And I'm curious if there's just any gems or pearls of wisdom general that you found helpful when getting a group of people together to start getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and feeling safe.
Yeah, and we're maybe getting into splitting some hairs here. I don't know if we necessarily produce a psychologically safe place, because many times our members hear things they probably don't want to hear. But it's at least done in a private environment, right? If you've reached any senior role in an organization, more likely than not, you have, let's say, run the gauntlet. Like, you've been through it, you're in it, you're seasoned, you might have some scars to prove it. And so most of our members have pretty thick skins. And in many cases, that's our job as peers in this environment to share with them maybe some blind spots. I'm saying that in kind of a politically correct way, but confronting them about problems that they might not be looking at, or flaws in their solution, or issues with their approach, or problems with their leadership, whatever it is. That's what peers, colleagues, friends in some cases that's our role, is to really bring those things up in an environment where they can feel. I think the psychological safety part is feeling like it's okay to share. And so that's part of my job, is to make sure that they have the right language, the right narrative, the right story around what they're working on. And we spend a significant amount of time answering the question, what challenge do you want to bring to the collaboration and allow us to help you solve? That's really the core of what we're at. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that narrative is correct, right? We do a lot of analysis, we do a lot of writing, we do a lot of meeting and workshopping around what that is. And then once we get there, we hit go and we get after solving that challenge. And so I think it's trust building. Obviously, these are not anything that's breakthrough, but building that trust, preparation, right? Presentation, collaboration, socialization. So those are all the things that kind of come to mind when they're always up when we get together as a group.
Yeah. So it sounds like, first of all, those who you're working with in your groups, one, because they are somewhat battle tested, they're more open to the idea of, okay, I might hear some things that might surprise me or I wasn't expecting, and are okay with that, which that really resonates with me, because as a futures and a strategist, I feel like I spend a lot of time helping people see their blind spots and what they're not seeing or realizing. And then I also think it's really interesting that you start with a very specific framing that then sort of pre-work, it sounds like, before it's shared out into the broader group. And the wondering that I have when you were sharing that is like, oh, I wonder if that also not only does it get all the information on the table and it structures it in a way that the collaborative can do something with it, but sometimes when you're holding on to something in your head too much, you have to put it out on paper. And maybe if you're just workshopping it with one other person first, then you get that emotional attachment or whatever those feelings are around it. I wonder if that kind of in the process also falls away.
Yeah, I think what would be best is just give you an example and peek inside what we do, because there's a lot that happens, and to me it's really interesting. I hope your listeners find it interesting and helpful as well. But one of our most requested and I'll say popular services or platforms that we offer our members is a presentation to the collaboration of a challenge. We call it a member challenge presentation. And picture, your innovation team, you're the chief innovation officer, you have 3 or 4 of your, direct reports with you, and you're at a corporate campus in their, large presentation room, and there's 100 to 150 other senior innovation leaders from non-competing organizations who are going to spend the afternoon helping you solve a challenge, whatever that challenge is, right? And like I said, we go through a painstaking process to make sure that is set up properly, right? Yeah. So you're tapping into the collective brain power of 100 to 150, we'll say, senior executives that are there to help and support you, not only in that particular moment to have conversations around whatever your challenge is, literally for an afternoon, but then also throughout the balance of your membership. So you present a challenge to the group, and then for the afternoon, you go around to 8 or 10 different small groups and hear their solutions to your challenge. right? Here's my challenge. Here are some questions. Help me solve this. And so you have these folks who are spending time working on your challenge. And so you have 8 or 10 different viewpoints in that particular moment around what those solutions are. So it's a rich dialogue of
Yeah.
possibilities that you get in that moment. It's very thought-provoking, provocative, and it takes a lot of energy as well. But then afterwards, you have all those folks who are with you as co-members in the collaboration that can continue to help you solve that challenge. Yeah. And so they can come back after a session and say, hey, Tommy, I really liked team X, Y, and Z. I really loved those 3 solutions. Can we continue that conversation and maybe have 3 individual conversations? I really want to hear what they talked about. I really want to hear what that group thought of our challenges. I really want to kind of drill into this particular aspect. I want to double click on that. And so not only in the moment do we have a large conversation around a challenge that most other folks have probably experienced as well, but then they also have the engagement after the fact to continue that conversation. And so that whole dynamic that I just described there is really the core essence of our collaboration, tapping into other folks who are willing to share their perspective and their solutions, and also have the experience to provide solutions that are not always, but mostly valuable and have nuance to it and can be really helpful to them. So that's just a reset on the whole group and everything that is encapsulated in our collaboration.
Well, I got to say, I have goosebumps. Now, I said in your introduction, what you're doing is radical. I'm going to continue to highlight that, because as a woman in innovation who's been involved in a lot of innovation communities, and obviously now I'm more in the startup to mid-stage company these days. I'm not in the big corporates anymore. But I'm just not, what you're doing is, I'm not seeing it happen where it's actually really around solving a specific problem that a specific person is having, right? There are innovation collaborations that are happening when you have a bunch of companies trying to solve climate change. And that's all well and good and super important. And I am pro that as well. But I think it's actually very provocative that you're getting people together in a room, and people, again, because I work with C-suite leaders who actually don't want their other peers knowing that they don't have the answer of like what their long-term strategy is. That's the work I do, right? Long-term strategy. I don't want anybody to know, right? Which to me that's something I've had to learn the last couple of years the hard way is, wow, okay, they're not willing to get in a room with people that they may not know, right? And be that vulnerable and say, I don't have the answer. But so that's why I really wanted you to have the opportunity to share that, because I believe it's quite incredible what you're doing.
Yeah, I think there's probably a chart that we can draw that the higher up you go in an organization, the more difficult it is to share that you don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the term is for that. Maybe that's arrogance or something else. I don't know exactly what that is, but yeah, like you're looked at, people come to you with questions and they expect you to know the answers. And if we're human, we're not going to know all the answers, and we're not always going to know the answers, especially in this type of a macro environment where politically and economically and technologically and demographically things are changing. Gosh, it almost seems like daily these days. Yeah. Yesterday your strategy was good. Yesterday it's not so good. Right. So who can you call to say, you know what, I've got this new issue? And it could be a quick half-hour conversation. It could be a chat with me. It could be a chat with one of our advisors. It could be a text. Hey, I'm having this issue. I just need to discuss this or bounce some ideas off you. What do you think? And then maybe the next day they do come back with some really good answers, right? Because they are in that role and they do need to have the answers. That's their job. So we provide the background behind that so they can tap into somebody and say, hey, this is what I need, a framework. I need a case study. I need to talk to a peer. I need to talk to 3 different service providers. And we can get all that to them very quickly, which for innovation leaders, the timeliness, the efficiency reflects on them. Like we're in a certain role where time and speed does matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I normally don't share this, but 2 words that I always write a couple of like words before I interview people. And for you, 2 that I had, which are coming up to me were humanity and humility. Right. Because I feel like that's so important. It's important if you want to be a future ready company. You need to value humanity. Like, we're people, perfectionism, forget about it, like taking care of ourselves. And then the humility of like, listen, not always going to get it right. I don't always know. Lewis and Clark, they didn't have the answers, right? But yet they went out west and on they went and they survived. And so I think those are two important words that I also think, as I think about innovation leaders, might not be super intuitive for them, for this humanity and humility aspect. So there, I don't know, there's something there. So let's expand beyond collaboration to what community can offer. Now, I know we're talking about collaboration, but they're definitely connected, right? And innovation, in my view, is born from the interaction of different ideas, perspectives, and disciplines. A lot of what you've been talking about, and a strong community can amplify it. It can take things to the next level. And vibrant communities are rooted in kind of what we've been talking about: trust, openness, shared wisdom, genuine support. And I continue to be quite intrigued that the CoLab consists of non-competitive companies that help each other solve these big challenges, and where it's an opportunity to get feedback and advice. And you talked about in our last conversation that there's like sparks that fly when this happens, and that definitely caught my attention. And so I'm curious, how are you building and amplifying the innovative capacity of the CoLab, and what's been maybe the most challenging or surprising about it?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things and surprising at the same time is the lack of value around that humanity part. Most of the executives, this is just business people, let's just say business people in general, right across the spectrum, small businesses, big businesses, public companies, private companies, startups, just business people in general, right? Getting back to the Steve Jobs conversation, we can't do this alone. We can't build a career alone. We can't do anything really alone. We depend on lots of different people around us. And I know inherently most people recognize that or accept it in some way, shape, or form. But what I don't see is the acting on that. I don't see the acting on like strategically and intentionally building a network of help and capability for them to advance not only their own careers, but the careers of other people as well. Because this is a two-way street, right? When I come and help you, right? I'm here brainstorming. You're presenting your challenge to me. I'm going to provide you some solutions, but that has value to me as well, right? Like helping other people. And so that's one of the, I guess, the pleasant surprises that comes with this work as well, is once folks get in the collaboration, once they get in the community and they start sharing, they're like, wow, when I help other people, when I am brainstorming other members' challenges and helping them with solutions, it's much like the teacher learns more than the student. It's like that.
Yeah.
And so we let them walk into that and let them notice that on their own. But the more they help others, the more it actually helps their own situation. So that's a pleasant, let's say, byproduct of this collaboration, is that members show up and they're like, yes, I have challenges, but I really get a lot more from helping other people. I get more from brainstorming other ideas and seeing what's going on inside inside of other organizations, right? And I'm going to brainstorm that. And if I have 20 or 30 different industries, which is the makeup of our collaboration, to benchmark against, it's a wide range of industries. It's manufacturing, it's distribution, it's technology, it's not-for-profits, sometimes it's government. Kind of to see a full canvas of what people are doing right now. Imagine having 30 different organizations' challenges and their solutions in front of you and the people there as well. That's what's going on real time in the marketplace right now within these organizations. It's usually the hairiest, most complex, biggest challenges that large organizations are facing.
Yeah.
So that's been a nice byproduct, pleasant surprise, is that our members really almost always, mostly get more from helping others than actually getting help themselves.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that's a really powerful aha for them. And I think part of what you're doing is you're fundamentally solving what I feel this is one of the hills I will die on. It's like one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders making is narrow casting and focusing on the familiar, right? And short-term is a disease is another thing I love to say. And so you have got to get outside of what you already know, especially when you're trying to innovate, grow, reimagine. Right? There's always time and mind share that needs to be dedicated to what your core business is, keeping the lights on, and then maybe what are the incremental efficiencies and improvements we need to make. But we know today that business moves way too fast. And so you constantly have to be onto what's next for your company. Now, it may take you 3, 5 years, 10 years even to achieve that what's next, but you have to be doing it now. And so I think the idea of crowdsourcing all the information that you're doing so that these leaders don't narrowcast and focus on the familiar is a real competitive advantage.
Yeah, and that's, we originally have a policy of no competitors allowed for that privacy factor. Obviously, they don't want to let their guard down
Right.
in front of competitors and share their plan. And my members don't share anything confidential. This is always around structures and organizations and things like that. But either way, when they don't have competitors in the room, they can share just a little bit more freely. And so seeing how organizations are fundamentally innovating, I choose those words specifically, like fundamentally, like what are the structures and the organizations and the practices and the teams, like fundamentally innovating, like how are they fundamentally innovating? And what that means is there are similarities, there are threads that run through all these different industries, even though they are disparate, right? Maybe they're overlapping and working with one another, but an energy company, a power company is going to innovate fundamentally in a different way than a CPG organization, than a manufacturing organization. Like they're all going to be innovating in different ways, but they can be defining innovation and setting up their structures and having incentive structures and metrics and teams and all those things. There is a thread that runs through them, and it's our job at the Innov8rs CoLab to recognize that thread and point it out. And then they share amongst one another and say, well, that works over there, it's probably going to work over here as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's important for an important distinction for our listeners to really take away, which is innovation is not an outcome. It's more of a process and a journey, an approach. There are a million synonyms we could throw in, but I think that's at least my personal point of view is it's not the outcome. Right. It could be a literal noun, an innovation, but right. But I think that's where people start to get the ambiguous nature of innovation is, yeah, of course it's going to be messy because there's not one way to get there. I was just going to say, to your point of what you're doing, you are gathering all these frameworks and these protocols that are proven, but I imagine there's also some magic that happens as you start to mix and match and experiment and play and reconfigure. And that's what imagination is, right? You're taking different parts and then you're experimenting with things that have worked in the past in a new way. And so I just think all that's really powerful.
Absolutely. And you synthesized the essence of innovation right there, right? It's ambiguous. It can be a lot of different things, right? And so it's not one thing or a couple things, it's a bunch of different things, right? It can be culture, it can be technology, it can like it's a gray zone. And that can cut both ways. That can be an opportunity and also can be a threat. And so those folks who are better at leading innovation are able to work in that environment where they can maybe take that ambiguity and shape it into something unique for their own organization, right? And that takes some skill to be able to craft innovation and say, we have this menu of options around what we could do and sometimes can't do with innovation. What is it for us? Let's step into the best innovation leaders step into that and say, we're going to craft it. We're going to shape it into something that's really unique for our own organization and for our own industry and for our own moment, right? We have a lot of items on the menu, right, to choose from. You can plug in digital, you can do culture, you can do you can plug in and have all these different things, but it's up to innovation leaders to create the meal from the ingredients.
It's so funny. I was just thinking, because I often liken myself to a Michelin-starred chef where I'm like creating 12 courses. I use a lot of health stuff. I use a lot of cooking stuff. And that's exactly what popped in my head when you were saying that. It's okay. The chief innovation officer is like the Michelin-starred chef, right? And he's got all access to all the and different ways of approaching what this huge meal is going to be, right? And he's got a sous chef and all, all of the other sort of support mechanics. It's like, then he gets to sit there and figure, okay, well, what ingredients am I going to pull? Like what pots and pans? And I think that's part of what makes innovation so exciting.
Yeah, and you had asked about community, and I don't know if I fully answered that question, but
Yeah.
we love this analogy. We love borrowing marginal practices, borrowing examples from other
Mm,
places. How do we borrow from medicine or law or athletics or
yeah.
Michelin star chefs? Like, what do we go to see what works for them or what doesn't work? And so in our community, we have access to a lot of amazing individuals who are either in the corporate realm or kind of adjacent to it as well. But sometimes we'll bring in an athlete, or we'll bring in a hotshot CEO or a venture capitalist who has done amazing things and hear, what they do. So yes, when we say benchmarking best practices, when we are hearing how a Michelin chef, creates the menu for the night and that process they go through, we want to hear about that. Like, how do they do
Yeah.
that? How do they craft that? Right. And so hearing how other folks are performing at the top of the game, and we want to focus on performing so our organizations are, they produce value for their shareholders, for their employees, for their customers, for their management. And so of course sharing these different anecdotes and
Yeah.
practices and that happens within the collaboration with different industries, but then it also can go beyond that as well. And of course I do love the athlete realm, and so I love to pull them into it as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. So, we have talked about the difficulties and the challenges of wrangling C-suite leaders on any initiative, whether it's innovation or otherwise. And I would definitely put future readiness in the same category. And with data indicating that 75% of companies are not prepared for the pace of change in around their industries, and only 6% of executives being completely confident in their company's ability to foresee and respond to future disruption. Now, that's according to Accenture. To me, the urgency for future readiness is mission critical. And so I want to flip the lens a little bit to the CoLab. So I'm curious, what maybe gaps or difficulties are you facing when anticipating and strategizing for your company's future? And what wisdom would you offer for leaders who are struggling with similar challenges?
Yeah, I think it comes back to like believing I don't know the term here, eating your own dog food. Like we have to believe in what we're talking about, right? Like we have to believe in and use many of the tools that we
Mm,
develop from our research. And when it comes to resilience and adaptability and transformation, we have to do the same thing as well, right?
yeah,
We have to be, and so our business, things do move quickly, right? Innovation teams don't last. And according to our research, most innovation teams don't last beyond 36 months. And they either get cut or restructured or downsized. That's a historical component across about 15 years of data that we have. And so we understand that it's a very time space of possibilities to do something when an innovation team comes in. So there absolutely has to be a sense of urgency to get things done. And we have to have our own resilience and adaptability to this. We went through it with the pandemic. Our business model was largely focused on
right.
in-person events for a very long time. We get together 3 or 4 times a year. That was the core organizing component. We get together at one of our members' headquarters, and that went away overnight with the pandemic and nobody traveling and nobody meeting. Thankfully, before that, we were resilient and adaptable and noticed that we were going to have to change. So we did start to move our model online. And so this isn't new or novel and innovative in any way, but we also, of course, had to move into the new space of possibilities. And now we're in this hybrid environment where we're doing in person and we're doing online, and we're actually much more effective now. So we moved with that. Our model is not necessarily unique, but it is different within it's rare, I'll say, within the corporate innovation
Yeah.
realm to have a community. So in that aspect, taking something that's not necessarily new or novel and applying it to new and novel people does make it
Yeah.
unique and uncommon. So
Yeah.
we have to believe in what we're preaching.
Yeah, I was gonna say, practice what you preach. It sounds is the advice that you would offer. And for you, for what you're doing is actually very germane, right? It's like, I don't want to say you're double dipping, but it's like, oh, okay, great. We're like learning all these like incredible things around how companies can reimagine and reinvent. And how can we take what we're experiencing and learning and apply it to ourselves, as it sounds like is something that you're doing, which is great. Now, is there anything else you'd like to add before we bring our conversation to a close?
Anything I'd like to add? No, I just appreciate and will point out this component of the, for lack of a better term, the whole person, right? Where it's an incredibly important component for any professional who is dealing with competitive aspects or stress or anxiety in any way, shape, or form to be able to perform or just do well at the top level. And I can always see a distinction between those folks who, let's say, don't take care of their concerns versus those folks who do. And we see, just an anecdote for our collaboration, we see the top performers. They're a nice blend between extroverts and introverts. Right? The Albert Einsteins, the Steve Jobs, touching back on those aspects, taking that time away, whatever it is, running, meditating, taking a nap, reading, taking care, exercising, taking care of the whole body to bring that into the work. Those folks who take that holistic approach versus at the desk all day and sedentary and don't take care of themselves or their families or their personal concerns, they're just not going to last. I practice that. I see that the top performers practice that. And it works. So I guess that's the one thing I just wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I think that's a marvelous way to bring our conversation to a close, because clearly I couldn't more agree. And I think it's actually being well is the foundation of working well, as they say. And so that is the starting point. And if you don't have that foundation, then it's good luck, especially when you're doing this type of work, which requires the ambiguity and the changing and the moving and all that's required. So with that, where can people go to find out more about you and your work, Tommy?
Yeah, feel free to visit our website, innovators.co. That's spelled INNOV8, the number 8rs.co, innovators.co. And you can learn about the CoLab. You can also learn about the broader innovators community, which has ongoing events and engagements and working groups. We'll be starting our programming here for the fall in September. And of course, my LinkedIn page as well. I publish occasionally and to my LinkedIn page. I don't know if that'll be included here or not, but those are two places that you can find us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and your brilliant insights, Tommy. It's been enlightening and I've had so much fun exploring with you today.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Fit. If you're listening, you're probably future curious. So follow me in my newsletter on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going and share your discoveries with the Future Fit community. And if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, rate, and review Future Fit on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time.